The weakest link is the person, and if they use their name, their child's name, date of birth, that sort of thing for the password, which is what a lot of people do, or even just password 123, then they're able to get in. So understanding human psychology actually helps you significantly in terms of finding your vulnerabilities in your systems and how the bad guys are going to get in.
Welcome to the Feria Techcast, where we bring you all things science, engineering, technology, and innovation. Today, we are joined by Gary S. Chan, a security mentalist who reveals how hidden influence shapes our decisions and affects today's cybersecurity risks. By combining mentalism with technical expertise, he makes complex concepts engaging and accessible. Gary is the Chief Information Security Officer for an $11 billion company and has served as president of the FBI St. Louis Citizens Academy Alumni Association and holds four security certifications plus a degree in electrical engineering and computer science from MIT. So, Gary, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me here. Look forward to our conversation.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here, Gary. So let's dive in. First, I like to start from your background. It's quite a unique fusion, an MIT engineer, a chief information security officer, and a security mentalist. So I'd like to ask Gary, what was the connecting thread that made you see the deep relationship between system security and human psychology?
Well, a lot of times the bad guys get into systems because of the weakest link, which is the human. A lot of times the technology itself is pretty strong itself. So if you have a very good password, for example, and if the algorithms in the backside to check your passwords and authenticate are good, it's really, really hard to break. It'll take you many, many years, if not centuries, to break them. But the weakest link is the person, and if they use their name, their child's name, the date of birth, that sort of thing for the password, which is what a lot of people do, or even just password 123, then they're able to get in. Understanding human psychology actually helps you significantly in terms of finding your vulnerabilities in your systems and how the bad guys are going to get in.
Okay, that's interesting. So, I read about where you describe using game theory and maths to predict human behavior. So, for our audience of engineers and technical thinkers, can you give us an example of how you model a social engineering attack as a system with predictable inputs and outputs?
Sure. I like drawing decision trees whenever I sort of think about systems. And when I say systems, I don't mean a computer system necessarily. It could be, but a system to me is just the whole environment, right? So let's say that I wanted to, it's always easier to talk about things that are physically tangible. Just because we can visualize it. So, not talking about cybersecurity, but physical security. If I wanted to say get into the office uh, of of a business person, and say they have an office there, and there's like a someone at the front desk. If I show up and I just say, "Hey, can I get access to that person's office?" They'll probably say no, right? Um, so what I could do is I could show up wearing a pizza uniform, maybe from Domino's Pizza, Pizza Hut, whatever, and then actually have a pizza and then say that it is for John Smith, the person that I'm, trying to break into their office. And there is a certain probability that the front desk person, especially if they're super busy, right? That they'll just open the door and let me walk in and then go, and I can go find that office, and then I can even leave the pizza. I probably wouldn't, but then and then I could do whatever bad thing I want to do. So that's a very simple example where essentially, if you draw out the decision trees, you can say, well, if I do this, it's likely that this person will do this with some probability, and then you just sort of pick whatever approach you want to take that maximizes the probability of you getting to the outcome that you want.
All right. So, You are responsible for securing an $11 billion company. So how do you apply the principles of mentalism and influence, not to deceive, but to actually build a stronger, more security conscious culture within your organization?
Sure. So let me first define a little bit of what mentalism sort of teaches you to do. It teaches you to really think about things from the other person's perspective. So when you understand it from the other person's perspective, you can then articulate. You can then articulate reasons and explanations that are easier for the other person to understand. And so I think one of the um, kind of the problems with security awareness training is that a lot of times it's not personalized to the audience, right? We say very kind of basic things like, "Hey, don't share your password." And so everyone's heard this before, but hey, I've got reasons that I should go share my password. So I'm just going to ignore this. It's just a guideline. It's just someone's advice, right? But right now, I need to share my password. Well, if we understand it from the other person's perspective, we can then craft things to in ways in which they may appreciate why sharing your password is a bad thing. So, for example, let's say that you have doctors. Doctors take a lot of pride in the work that they do, as they should. And one of the things that they do is they have to go into an electronic healthcare records and write their diagnosis for patients or things like that. Well, if they share their password and you explain this to them, you say, hey, if you share your password and someone else logs in as you, and then they write things about the patient that are not true or that don't represent you correctly, right? Let's say you share your password with a nurse to document whatever it is that you say. Well, the nurse doesn't have the same training that you do, so maybe they write it incorrectly, and as a result of that, the patient gets the wrong diagnosis, at least what's written, or they get the wrong prescription, or something bad happens. Well, if they get sued for that, well, guess whose name is on that record? It's going to be the doctor's name, that because that's what shows that that person was logged in. So even if he argues, hey, that was really a nurse, but the nurse says, oh, no, 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 I didn't do it. Well, guess what? The doctor's probably one that's going to be in trouble because you can't prove that it was not him. So if you can explain it in that fashion where it makes it very personal to them in their job responsibility or in their personal life, that to them is going to be a lot more compelling than just saying, don't share your password. Because otherwise, you know what? They might just do that because they're not thinking about some of those downstream consequences about it. So that's how it kind of helps. The mentalism helps a lot because you're really thinking about it from the other person's perspective and then crafting your message in such a way to where it's more receptive to them.
That's really insightful, Gary. So you mentioned that criminals exploit predictable human behavior. So what is the most common predictable, quote unquote, bug in human decision making that you see consistently exploited in cybersecurity attacks or cyber
Well,
attacks,
there are
rather?
there are plenty of them. It's hard for me to rank them. I'll just give a couple of examples. Um, authentication is really something that hackers really like, right? They really want to get into people's accounts, and as we sort of mentioned earlier in this episode, basically it's very easy to guess or break into some companies by guessing passwords. Now, what will happen, especially for a very large organization, is they will have, say, 10,000 or 100,000 employees. Well, you know what all the usernames are probably going to be, right? Is John.Smith or J Smith or, whatever, right? At, that company name. You can sort of guess that pretty easily. And in fact, there's some uh, companies out there for email validation that will just tell you what the email format is. You can even buy lists of people's email addresses, which allows you to know their username. So anyway, to log in, you're probably going to need a password and say a two-factor authentication code, like something, or like a pop-up or something where it goes to your phone and you click, you approve. Well, with the passwords, it's not like I'm trying to get into specifically John Smith's account. I really don't care whose account I get into. I just want to get into one of them. And so if I have 10,000 or 100,000 employees, and I take the most common password, and they've got statistics about this, about what the most common passwords people pick are, right? You can then just use the same password for all of them. And guess what? At least one of them is probably going to work. So once you get one of those, then it sends the little prompt to the other person, and say it's one of those where you just have to click I accept. Well, do that at 2 a.m. in the morning whenever they're sleeping. It's going to constantly ding their phone. So you just put in the correct password, and then it dings their phone. Maybe you don't hear it the first time, maybe you don't hear it the second time, but at some point they're probably going to hear it because they're sleeping, and then they're going to not really be thinking that well at 2 a.m. in the morning. And this is called MFA bombing, where you just annoy them so much, even if they click decline, it's each time you enter a password, it's going to ding them, it's going to wake them up. So you just one of those times they're going to click accept, and then at that point you're in. So that's an understanding of human behavior, where you kind of guess some password, you do it to everybody, and then for the ones that are correct, you just keep dinging them at some early hour in the morning, and they'll probably let you in. But there are plenty more examples of how bad guys can exploit human behavior in order to advance whatever it is that they want to do.
All right, that was a really, really interesting example there. So I'd like to move on to a different topic, Gary. Let's talk about AI. So with the rise of artificial intelligence, how are these psychological attacks evolving? Is AI just a more efficient tool for executing old tricks, or is it enabling fundamentally new forms of manipulation?
But definitely new forms. And I'll give you one example. So you can actually now combine. So there's generative AI, and then there's automation, right? So in the past, what would happen is, let's say you break into one person's email account. Well, you might want to use that email account to say, try to phish somebody else so you can get access to it. So let's say that I'm trying to get a company to pay a fraudulent invoice, and I get access to a manager's email account. I can use that account to email the accounts payable department to then say, hey, you need to pay this vendor. Of course, that vendor's fake. That's the bad guy's vendor. That's their paperwork. But you can use the email account to basically further your phishing campaign, or your business email compromise, or whatever thing you're trying to do. And you can use that for all sorts of different things. That's just one example. And so what you can do with this AI now is you can get the AI to read all of the emails that this person has sent in the past to get an understanding of, one, who they send emails to, right? So if they always send it to Jackie in accounts payable, then you're going to send it to Jackie. You're not going to send it to Bobby, right? Or, as part of your campaign, you want to keep those relationships. And then you can also, secondly, understand the tone and how they write, right? Maybe this person writes very briefly, or maybe they always write like an essay. Maybe they always are very polite, or maybe they're very rude with the way that they write, right? So now they can understand the tone, and then it can send an email impersonating that person much better than the fraudster himself could probably do. And then it'll send it to the right people, and then it all can also be very responsive and fast, right? With the automation, it can do it very quickly, it can respond, because you want to get in and out as quickly as possible in general. And so it can do that, and that you can also automate deleting the email. So, like covering your tracks, for example, I'll send the email to over to the accounts payable department, and then I delete the email so that the real person, when they log in, they don't see that email. And when Jackie emails me back and says, "Oh yes, I'm processing this now," the AI can read that, understand the context, maybe send a copy to the bad guy, and then delete the email from the inbox so that the bad guy didn't even know that there was a correspondence with Jackie when Jackie responded. So without all of this automation in AI, the fraudster would have to be watching 24/7, and probably couldn't write as clearly, or using the same tone, and maybe emailing the wrong people. So the AI makes it faster, it's more seamless, it looks and feels like the real person, and it can be significantly more effective. So that's one example of how generative AI can really impact things.
Oh, great, great. That's really interesting. That's You shared great insights on how, AI tools can be useful to the bad guys. But I'd like to ask, the same AI tools, how can they be used by, companies or organizations that want to protect themselves from these bad guys? Are there any, applications of AI, to better secure themselves from being targeted by the bad guys who are also using AI?
Well, yeah. So for every AI that the bad guy uses, there's AI on the defense side. So since we are talking about email, there are companies that will use AI to look for these sorts of emails, and it can learn over time what are legitimate emails and what are illegitimate emails. Some of them work pretty well, and then so that it can sort of eliminate those emails. But of course, as a company, you have to go buy these types of tools, right? But over the spectrum, they have companies using AI for all sorts of different things, even blocking at the firewall and all the other things that that can be used for.
Okay, so moving on, Gary, from your unique vantage point, what is the biggest blind spot for that technically brilliant security teams often have when it comes to defending against the human element?
Oh, I think you already know the answer, just the way that you phrased the question. The biggest spot is they are always looking at the technical solution. They don't look as hard at the non-technical solutions, right? So the technical solution for a password, maybe you just increase the password length, that you make it 100 characters long, right? So of course that we wouldn't do that, but yeah, the technical solution is what people really kind of drive towards, not as much, say, the education side, with the people, or changing the system in such a way to where that particular flaw might not be possible. So, for example, with tailgating, that means that if I'm a employee, I can use a badge and I can badge into the building, and then I can open the door and then go in, right? So, with a um, with you can use for tailgating, um, you can stop people by doing that using a technical solution, which will be a man trap. So what'll happen is you badge in, you go into the first door, um, and then if there are two people inside of this sort of inside this area, then it won't allow you to open the second door, right? So only one, you badge in, you go into the central location, only one person can be there, then you badge in and you go out. So a favorite solution of technical people will be, well, let's just put in a man trap. Well, one, you may not be able to do that because one is it's expensive, and then secondly, like maybe there's no like real estate there to kind of go do that, and then thirdly, maybe what's behind the door is just a conference room, and it's really like not a big deal if the bad guy gets in. A lot of times, whenever technical people look at problems, they look at solving it from a technical perspective. They don't think about the business value. Like, do I even need to solve this problem? And then they don't look at like other elements of that might be far cheaper and then sufficient to address the risk that's there.
All right, so for the developers and engineers listening, what is one simple principle from mentalism that they can apply to their own work, whether in UX design, team communication, or system architecture to, create more resilient outcomes?
Sure. Always look at it from the end user perspective, because people will work around you. So if you, for example, want to block a website for whatever reason, you're going to go block it. Just understand that people will probably just then work around you. Maybe they will use a different computer. Maybe they will use the work computer but connect it to a different network that you don't control. Depend to work around whatever block that you have. People will work around you. So if you put in the technical control, that might not be sufficient. You have to think about all the things that they're going to do, and then put in a whole system that blocks sort of all of it. I'll give you another example that's pretty funny. Is yeah, I used to work a lot with DMVs looking for anti identity fraud, and what would happen is a lot of times people in college, they want to get an ID showing that they're 21 years old so they can buy alcohol. And so it's not really terribly malicious, but of course it is against the law. And what they'll do is they'll go to the DMV, and the DMV asks for things like, show me a utility bill with your address and all this other stuff. Well, what a lot of people would do is they would take their roommates. So if their roommate was 21 and they're not 21 yet, they'll take their roommates, because they have access to the mail and they living in the same place, and so they'll use that to go get the ID. And so there are other controls which I won't talk about, that the DMV has to identify when someone does something like that. But the funny thing is that the college student, they'll go to the DMV, they'll get denied, and then what'll happen is they'll drive to the next nearest DMV and try the same thing. So then the DMV people, they all know this, and then they call up the next DMV and they said, John Smith just came in. He's wanting a fake ID. He's going to be coming to you next, right? And so it's just very funny that you can see, and I can enumerate out like, this is what they're going to do first. This is what they're going to do second. Once they get denied there, they're going to do this thing, then they're going to do this thing, then they're going to do this thing, and then they just give up. Right? So it's just pretty funny, when you think about it from the end user perspective. You can map all of these things out, and then you can build a much more secure system, as opposed to just saying, I've got this technical problem, let me solve this technical problem, and then you wait, and then someone else brings up another technical problem and you solve it. Right? You're going to be chasing that forever, and you probably are missing something.
All right. So, looking at the future, what emerging trend at the intersection of technology and human psychology should security professionals be paying more attention to?
I wouldn't be surprised if there was some new company out there that was going to create something that would bridge the two. I think that there already are some companies that are kind of, I think, on the cusp of that. What they do is they create a human risk score, and they look at everything that the human does, whether on their computer or on the network, and they assign a score for that particular person. So in your company, this software, and there's several companies that do this, they'll say Jack is a 5 out of 10, and Bob is a 7 out of 10. I'm just making up numbers, it doesn't matter. And it's just saying, hey, if they've got a really high score, then then these folks are really bad at security, or whatever. So it's basically doing that sort of monitoring analysis, and then at some point we may end up with Minority Report, the movie, where they say, well, we know that Bob is probably going to, in the next 5 days, there's a very high probability that he's going to lose his password, or something like that, based on all of the other historic information that they have and stuff like that. So I think we're moving towards sort of the Minority Report, where these systems are really going to be able to predict people extremely well. And then as a result of that, people can start taking actions based on those probable outcomes. And then you may end up with people getting punished. Hopefully not, but then people getting punished for things that haven't even done yet, but they're likely to do. So I think we're moving in that direction, and hopefully we stop somewhere before people get punished.
That's insightful. So, your work, Gary, reveals the hidden forces that shape our decisions. So, I'd like to ask, what is one practical, immediate step individuals can take to become more aware of these influences in their digital lives daily?
Oh, I think the most important, or one of, I shouldn't say the most, one important one that impacts people a lot are default settings. Default settings affect you in all sorts of ways every day. And you may install an app on your phone once a week or once a day, whatever it is. And there are default settings associated with that. Not only just when you install, but even over time as they get upgrades, there are more and more sort of settings and things like that. And this isn't just about security. It could be for really anything. It really impacts your life. So just my default setting, for example, when I install Windows or install some operating system, it'll ask me, for example, to put in a 8-character password, as an example, right? Well, imagine if that was put in a 4-digit PIN, or if there was no password whatsoever. A lot of people just use the default, whatever that is. And you can imagine that if on the one end it was a very difficult to remember password, well, maybe a year from now I forget my password, and then I'm completely locked out. That really impacted my life because I lost access to all the data that's on there. On the other hand, if the default was to have no password, and then someone random person comes into my house and like logs in and steals my data, that's a different issue. So I would say looking at what the default settings are whenever you install something, uh, I think that's super important. And then even if you have more time once a year just to look through all of your applications, because that really does impact your life in ways that you may not notice.
Okay, so if you could instill one mindset or core belief in every new engineer graduating today, Gary, tell us what would it be based on your experience at the crossroad of code and cognition?
Sure. Understand how it is that your work is being used in the business. So, if you understand how your role fits into how the company makes money, you're going to be much better off. Because you'll be able to design systems that people actually want, and as a result of that, you're going to get promoted more likely than your peers, and then you'll earn more money. Right. So you can see what I just did right there too. Rather than just tell people, "Hey, go learn the business, go learn how you fit in the business," I actually articulated why you might want to do that. You might get a promotion, you might make more money. These are all things that people will generally want to do. And that's my point, is you have to really understand why somebody would want to follow your advice and then articulate that, and then people will go do it.
Okay, that's insightful. So, Gary, part of the theme of this podcast is centered around innovation. So, for that reason, I like to ask every guest a common question around innovation. So, tell us, in your career, moving from electrical engineering to protecting human system vulnerabilities, what does the word innovation truly mean to you?
Innovation to me is creating something new, something that the world hasn't necessarily seen before. And for me, when the innovation that I created was a mentalism show that basically is a very entertaining yet educational presentation for security awareness training. Because the general gist was most people don't really care about security awareness training. They don't want to be told, like, don't share your password. They don't want to be told these basic things because they think that they know it. And I turn all of that into a very fun and entertaining show. So to me, that's my contribution from my career for innovation. But it's just creating something that people haven't seen before.
Oh, great. Gary, for our listeners who are fascinated by your work and want to learn more, or perhaps even for a corporate event or security training, where's the best place for them to, connect with you?
Sure. Well, they can find me on Google by typing Gary Chan Security Mentalist. I'll come right up. Or they can go directly to my website, gschan2000.com, and you'll find me there.
Oh, that's quite a special website.
Yeah,
Gary,
I came up with that when I was it was my personal website. When I then later people asked me to do these magic shows, mentalism shows, and I just reused that one. And I didn't. It wasn't intended to be a business at the time. It was just intended to be for fun. So I've just kept that over the years because people have gotten to know it over time. So that's
yeah,
why it's like that. Yeah.
well, that's interesting to know. Finally, Gary, it's been a really insightful conversation with you, and I'm excited to have you on the show today.
Yeah, no, it's been a pleasure to be here. I appreciate all your very thoughtful questions, and uh, yeah, it was fun.